Good evening. So tonight I thought I'm going to make another video about a completely different topic. And the way I got to this was somehow on YouTube. I had something pop up in that YouTube feed and it said, no, I searched for it. I was interested to see if people would move to other countries like Bulgaria or Romania, just out of curiosity. And I came across several young British couples which have moved in the last 3 or 4 years to Bulgaria in the wake of the Brexit and COVID. And those are probably all young families, I would say probably in their 20s for the better part. And what they winded up doing was they bought these rather, compared to our standards, cheap older farmhouses out in the countryside in the south and more the central part of Bulgaria. And they ended up spending somewhere between $5,000 to $20,000 for the whole thing, which gives you, from what I have researched, about 1,000 to 2,000 square meters of a property. That is an American size, about a quarter acre to half acre property with old homes on it, smaller houses typical for the area, reminiscence of that what you would find in most Orthodox countries in terms of the layout, the style of the kitchen, the heating and the bathroom situation and all of that stuff. And I thought that is quite interesting. Not a lot of people have moved to Romania. It seems to be Bulgaria where I wouldn't say it's a mass movement, but a few people have moved there, primarily because they were able to buy the property outright. And it was interesting to see of how they got there, got the property, and then when they finally entered the property to took possession of it, then the work started, of course, and I had to kind of smile at this a little bit, the overgrown area. Everything is half a jungle, and you have to get the weed whacker out and that sort of stuff. And I kind of had a smile about it because it is an adventure, And I can understand what these young folks are trying to find is, a sort of a freedom. You're breaking out of the typical British structure and the expenses which come with it. Germany, France, all of the Central European countries and the United States have gotten quite expensive. Here, the younger people in the United States, they buy themselves a van-type vehicle, and they turn them into a camper, and then they go around, or they, buy a property out west too. Here, you probably have to spend a little bit more, but you get much larger parcels of land, and then they build homes on there, various forms of them. Most of them are like, what do you call them, log cabins, or they just put a tent up and kind of reinforce all of that stuff, that sort of thing. I found that interesting. And then there's another group which seems to be gravitating towards Portugal. And I had to smile about it. So now I wanted to think about this. I have quite some experience with building because I have worked construction, and I, have lived and owned properties and did a wide variety of work. I've never built a complete house, but the biggest project I ever did was in Hawaii when I lived in Hawaii. I had a duplex and I built out the attic because the angle was steep enough where you could actually stand tall up there, and you had quite some space. And the attic, of course, covered the entire square footage of the house, the outline of the house, and it gave me another almost 1,000 square feet of space on an additional level. So I did that, and that is now almost 20 years ago that I did this, to expand rooms. So living in Hawaii, especially on Oahu, I know what it means when the land is limited and you have to make do with the resources you got and what you got there to get the most out of it. And then, of course, the other thing is, with old buildings, our expertise here lies with castles. And a castle is a building, as a building, as a building, in that there's really no big difference in it. Whether you're going to move to Bulgaria and you buy a 100-year-old farmhouse, or like a friend of mine did, he bought a 125, 150-year-old farmhouse here in South Kansas towards the Oklahoma border, not too far, about a 40-minute drive north of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I went down there and I helped him to set up his generator for emergency power and that sort of thing. And that building had been empty for quite some time too, and he had similar problem. So the problem with all these old buildings, no matter really where you are, is the construction of something which was built. So like probably in some areas, like in Bulgaria, probably into the 1950s or 60s. In some areas, probably before 1930. They have a common makeup of materials used in the way these homes were built, especially if there's rock and brick involved. And you have a traditional kind of a roof on top of it with the framework for the roof. And that is the two critical areas in this. So if you're thinking about buying something like this, I wanted to give you a few ideas, and this is going to be a different video where you're not going to be watching me, but I will show you and narrate through pictures and videos from different projects. I have picked one project in Bulgaria where I wanted to show you the damage of the roof from rain and especially hail, and what that does to the foundation of the building and the walls, especially if they're brick walls or some older forms, cheaper forms, which they did back then, which was a mixture of just dried clay walls, basically, with plaster on it. And then the other one is in Portugal, where I believe, German girl bought some property in central Portugal, and she winded up digging up around the building, the foundation, to get everything dried out. Because once the roof goes, and I want to show you this with our old castle in Kamenz, that's the German name of the town. Today it is Kamienik Zapkowice, it's part of Poland, of what they went through. And that is probably the best part to start here. So the person you're seeing now, that is Uncle Alfred. Not Uncle Ernie, this is Uncle Alfred, that's my uncle. He is technically my third cousin. And Uncle Alfred he was born in 1924 in Costa Rica, because his father, Sigismund, Sigismund and his wife had left Germany after the revolution, around 1920-21. And Sigismund got involved in Guatemala and the coffee trade. So he was exporting coffee beans from Guatemala, but living in Costa Rica, to Germany in the 1920s when it was the Weimar Republic. Sigismund had a brother. His name is Waldemar. And Waldemar and his wife, they didn't have any children. So it was only Sigismund and his wife who had Uncle Alfred, and then a sister. I can't remember her name right now. We have so many family members that I cannot remember all names. I have to look that up. Once it goes past the first degree, so to speak, it gets very difficult. Because I have already a large family in the first degree, and then second, third degree, fourth degree. I have to look them up. I cannot remember all these people. But Uncle Alfred, I do know. He is also from a cadet branch of our house, and his father, his grandfather, was Prince Heinrich von Preußen. I think he was one of the children of the emperor from before Wilhelm II. He was either a brother to Wilhelm II or something like this. I would have to look that up too. But just it goes quite a way back. That is not really that important. When my grandfather's uncle passed away in 1940 of cancer, they had divided our trust we had and our cadet branch trust, where all the businesses and everything was included in it as well. The two castles in Berlin and in Kamieniec-Zapkowicki was divided between my grandfather and his four cousins. Four cousins were from my great-grandfather's younger brother. So they divided everything by 5. And the way they did this was that my great-granduncle transferred the assets of the trust to Waldemar, Sigismund's brother, basically Uncle Alfred's uncle. And they then combined it, and Waldemar paid out my grandfather and the 4 cousins of my grandfather. So this is how our trust was dissolved basically in 1940. And in this process, Waldemar took over in control of the castle in Kamieniec-Zapkowicki, which was Kamenz back then. And they stayed until shortly before the Red Army arrived there. This was like in the spring of 1945. I would say it was early April. I think April the 10th was when Waldemar and his wife left for Bavaria. They went to Bavaria, and he passed away. Waldemar passed away because he had a rare blood disorder, and he passed away from that in, I would say, June, July, August, somewhere around there, shortly after they had arrived there. And that put Waldemar's wife was basically now inherited Waldemar's estate, since they didn't have any children. And Uncle Alfred and Sigismund and his wife and the sister of Uncle Alfred, they were living in Costa Rica. So what they did was now, when Uncle Alfred's uncle, when Waldemar's wife passed away, I think that was in the 1950s, Uncle Alfred's sister had moved from Costa Rica to Germany and got married there, and they had 2 daughters. And she inherited through that lady, Waldemar's wife, when she passed, the estate in northern Germany, which they had. And Uncle Alfred got a certain amount of cash as inheritance and the rights to the castle in Kamieniec-Zapkowicki, because that was in Poland at that time. So anyway, so this is how we got to this. And I met Uncle Alfred in 1993 when I was living in Brooklyn, and I was going to Pace University in Manhattan, because he also had an apartment on the Upper East Side, and he and his wife, that is the 2 people you're seeing now, they traveled a lot to New York from Costa Rica in those days. And Uncle Alfred shared with me that he had gone on my first meeting in 1993. He was in New York for a week. He shared with me that he had traveled to Kamieniec-Zapkowicki undercover, incognito, I'm not kidding you, to inspect the castle. And this is where we're going to get started. Now I'm going to give you some pictures. These pictures come from my friend Stefan Gnasi and Matthäus or Matthew Gnasi, who is his son. Stefan passed away in 2018, unfortunately. They both run the local history club in Kamieniec-Zapkowicki. So these are the pictures you're seeing now, which we're going to be talking. and I will narrate you through, and I will tell you what issues we had and what Uncle Alfred here discovered. So this is Kamieniec Zapkowiecki, our castle as it is today. The city of Kamieniec Zapkowiecki has spent quite some money to get the roof repaired and the outside the park basically at this point. Some work was done on the inside, but the story actually starts here. So in 1945, the Red Army took over the castle and they basically looted it. And then they left it, and the local Polish people who had moved there or were relocated there, they basically ransacked the place and stripped out windows and everything else, and then set it on fire, and the roof was gone. In the early 1980s, this particular fellow by the name of Sobic, I believe it is pronounced, rented the castle from the Polish government in order to fix it up a little bit and open a coffee shop in there. So he put in a roof. And this is what the roof looked like. The problem was it did not fully seal, and the four towers he did not put a roof in that one. That resulted now in water getting into the basement, the one you can see here of the castle. And this was after the water had been pumped out of there. And this here is a picture of what the Great Hall inside the building used to look like it and what it looks like it today, since they have not renovated this or fixed it up again. And now comes the story on how Uncle Alfred visited this place. So in 1992, Uncle Alfred traveled over there to take a look at this castle. And Sobic was still having, possession of the property. And I don't know exactly the details on how he got in there. But the story goes is that he inspected everything. And he winded up getting these rubber boots, the fly fishers, the ones who go, trout fishing and that sort of stuff. They got these rubber boots which go all the way up to the hips. He had himself gotten a pair of those, and that's how he actually got with a very strong flashlight into the basement, because that picture you saw of the basement was 4 feet underwater because of the way the roof was repaired. And that meant that the castle basically the basement had been submerged in water since probably 1946, and that never got rid of it. Sobic didn't have enough money, since he did finance this out of his paycheck as professor at the University of Breslau, or Wroclaw today. And so he did some work, he got the coffee going and that sort of stuff. So when Uncle Alfred and I met in New York in 1993, we had a lengthy discussion over 1 week of what we would do with this castle in the condition it was in. Now, Uncle Alfred had studied architecture in, I believe it was in Costa Rica, in his youth, and he also had studied in Venezuela, I think in Caracas, at the university there, because he was fluent in Spanish and English, and he had studied architecture there. So he was quite proficient with the buildings and how this all worked. So he explained that to me. And the reason why I'm showing this is now we're going to get into the buildings in Bulgaria and in Portugal, or whatever place you may have, which are old, say like anything older than 35, 50 years, and who had roof problems. And I want to show you what these roof problems look like in these smaller buildings, but the damage essentially, whether it's a castle, a villa, a palais, or a house, a farm or whatever, constructed out of brick and rock, what they're going to experience when you have moisture or even water coming in from either the inside of the basement, if there is a basement, or the outside, if the outside is not properly drained, which it usually is not in these old buildings. They were not that worried about the drainage. And there we have now the situation there. I think I'm going to start with the roof, because the roof is the cause of the issues you're going to have in the basement. A lot of these homes and houses are built into a hillside, into a sloping hill. And they will have, usually facing the north side on that is usually the wall which is exposed to the hill is itself, where the water cannot properly run off. Now the issue we have here, we will see this in the pictures, is that the joints between either the rock pieces or brick pieces deteriorates, and the mortar they used back then, over the time it has changed, consisted primarily of lime and of sand with some form of a binding agent, and that varied by region, and that stuff crumbles. It just completely dissolves. So when you go on the joint with your fingers, you can usually scrape this out. And the problem with moisture in there is that you're going to have mold in there, most likely, some form of mold, either green mold or black mold or white mold. One mold is going to be in there. And the rock walls which were usually the basement walls, were made out of rock, out of local rock they found there, especially when there was plenty of it around. And it was just mortared together, one piece after another, and that's how they built up after they had excavated the construction site, the property, the place where the house would sit on. And on our castle here, I say our castle, it is now belongs to the state of Poland, is because we didn't proceed further on it. The walls in the basement are 6 feet thick to support the weight on top of it. So that's another thing, is these walls were thicker in the basement, and then with each floor, the wall thickness gets less and less and less. That's how they transferred the weight from the top floors down into the lower floors into the basement. And on a 6 foot thick wall, you're going to have a lot of issues getting fresh cement or mortar, properly mixed mortar with cement, into the rocks. And that also entails that you have to eventually dig up around the outside perimeter all the way down below the floor of the basement to reach the wall, so you can actually reconstruct the wall from the outside. To combat mold in there, this is going to be extremely difficult, because if you spray a mold remover or mold destroyer or something in there, or bleach will work for that stuff usually, that will not, that could further dissolve all of the mortar, the old style mortar in there, and you have nothing left. And it is going to become very difficult to fill up these joints with fresh mortar. So mostly the fix, and you will see this in the videos from the gal in Portugal, she did this on her foundation there on the basement wall of that one building she was fixing up. And I will point that out, is that she had she actually put cement over the wall on the outside completely, and then applied a tar paint to seal the new concrete cement surface she had put over all these rocks. And they had put new rocks where rocks had fallen out, which had the mortar had dissolved so far that this was all completely redone, and it was quite time consuming. And she had some help there. This is a pretty time consuming business to do this. This can get so bad that the foundation actually is damaged. beyond repair, especially when this whole thing starts to shift, to settle, and to crack. And at that point, the only option you really have is basically to tear the whole place down. And this is why I'm making this video. So if you're thinking about buying a property, even a cheap one out there, these are the issues you may can run into. On the inside of the building, you have the same issues. If the plaster is gone, they had put on there the white plaster, the stucco basically, on the outside, and the plaster on the inside, if that has come off, it is easy to see the damage to the joints or any cracks, separations of the walls from earthquakes or other settlements and shifting of the building and that sort of stuff. But you won't see this until this is actually removed and you have full exposure to it. What Alfred did is he took a dentist type tool, that is the one with the pointer, with the sharp pointer, and he went in there and he scraped out a few joints to see how far he could go into this wall. I mean, you remember that the wall in the basement is 6 feet thick, until it actually stops. When it stops to come loose by just scraping on it, then there is hope there. If you basically scrape and you wind up on the other side of the wall, then that means that none of these joints have any physical strength anymore to keep the entire substructure together. And with that, you have a severe foundation issue, which could result in the collapse of the entire building if these rocks ever starting to shift. Bricks are not that tricky because they're square and they just sink together, but they will separate and they will fall out, and then you have the whole wall falling over. I will show that too. So that will be the last segment, and then I'm going to check in after that. I hope the narration works. So here we have now a typical building in Bulgaria, and we can see how the roof got damaged to this barn basically. And here we can see on the outside the wall structure on how the hole is actually how that type of wall they use there next to the brick is a combination of clay and other local ingredients, and the rainwater basically has softened it and it completely disintegrated. Here we can see now the roof, and we can see the damage to the main beam, to the center beam. And that was then the result of moisture getting there. And in this last picture, we can see on how they actually used local lumber from the trees on the property when they built this roof. That is typical for the time, the way they constructed these buildings. And I have a video here which shows the way that was done in Germany for centuries basically, until we had sawmills.
Die Gattersäge ist hier so eingerichtet, dass das Kernholz für Balken und die Ränder für Bretter genutzt werden können. Man braucht die Stämme, die möglichst gerade gewachsen sein sollen, nicht eigens vorzurichten. Das geschnittene Holz wird nach vorne herausgefahren und legte 50 cm mächtige und 4,50 Meter lange Eichenstamm hat ein Gewicht von 10 bis 12 Zentnern.
Hui, Anti, komm. Hui, 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 hui.
Jawohl, prima.
Stamm vom Abladeplatz mit den Kanthaken auf den Schneideplatz hinabgerollt werden.
20 cm.
24 ist zu viel, müssen wir auf 22 gehen.
Gut.
22.
Gut.
Etwas rein.
Gut.
So.
Nach dem ermittelten Maß kennzeichnet man jetzt auf der ersten Seite schon die Kante. Bei Baumstämmen, die nicht schnurgerade gewachsen sind, gibt es verhältnismäßig viel Abfall. Wenn man jetzt die stehen gebliebenen Backen mit der Axt bearbeitet, lassen sie sich verhältnismäßig leicht heran. Der behauene Eichenstamm liegt richtig, wenn er bis zur Hälfte über den Sägebock hinausragt. Muss der Stamm nun ausgerichtet werden.
Linke Sick ankielen.
Der erste Schnitt wird in der Stammmitte angesetzt, weil sich das Holz hierbei zur Hälfte aufspaltet und seine Spannung verliert. Die Dielen eines Eichenstammes, der schon vorher zerschnitten war, werden hier neben dem Sägebock weggeräumt. Man legt sie sorgfältig zusammen, wie sie ursprünglich gesessen haben. Zwischengelegte Lättchen sorgen dafür, dass die Luft durchstreichen kann. Wer es sich leisten konnte, ließ das geschnittene Holz auf diese Weise 2 bis 3 Jahre lang lagern und trocknen.
So now we have come to the property in Portugal where they're starting to excavate this. And you can see how difficult that is to get along the wall side all the way down. And now they're starting to string this up, and you can see the holes in the wall where the missing rocks are. All of these rocks have to be replaced and then put in with new mortar. And then after the mortar has been applied, they're putting cement over the wall. And then they're applying the black tar paint, which is a bitumen type paint. And then they're starting to lay the drainage pipes in there, and they're filling that up with a small to medium sized gravel for probably 2 or 3 feet, and then the rest of it is going to be dirt. And that is the proper drainage of a wall facing a hillside, or any wall for that matter. And here we have a castle in Romania, which is not in the best condition. It has a sales price of 250,000 euros. And here we can see, first of all, one of these cracks I had described earlier in the wall, which probably was caused by an earthquake, a light earthquake. And you can see on how the wall itself has separated the left side of the building. So here we have some significant structural damage to the building. And if this is a load-bearing wall, we will have a huge problem. And these are now the pictures of some green mold. You can find the first one here is from one of the rooms on the ground floor, on the first floor. And the other one here is from the basement. This is just an idea of what this looks like. So it doesn't matter if you have a castle or a barn in Romania or in Bulgaria or anywhere else in the world. This is what this is going to look like. What you can expect once you remove, or what you hope for, you're not going to find when you remove the plaster on the inside of your walls or the outside. So this was my video here, and I hope that this video has been helpful and not too boring to anyone who might be interested in buying an old property, whether it's a farm, whether with barns and a main house, or whatever type of building it may be. Of course, you can ask a question in the comment section, and I will see if I can answer that. But that should give you somewhat an idea. It's more thorough, the pre-purchase inspection is of the building, and there's more, you know what to look for. Is more likely it is that you will buy the right property for you, where you don't run into major issues and you're gonna experience major setbacks and disappointments and that sort of stuff. Improperly repaired or restored buildings, properties become very difficult to sell later on if the craftsmanship is questionable in these type of projects. If you ever want to, thinking about selling that property in a few years from now, when you get older, you may have different needs or different ones, and you think, oh, we may want to put it up for sale. And then you may find that the prospective buyer may not be easily convinced that this is the right property for them. This is also when you do bathrooms and kitchens and these type of things in a certain way, which is not in a standard which is found in most homes. You have to remember that too. The resale value, the property value, highly depends on these things. Well, I hope I presented a new type of video for you, and I hope I will see you when we have some other interesting topics we're going to talk about it. Other than that, I wish you a great night.